One I made in 2008. That's the work which I'm going to show first. It's a very contemplative project, which also reflects the last, to some extent that reflects to my practice, and also to some extent it responds to the time, the life I lived in Bombay, uh, the period, uh, also responding to a certain history of, you know, Bombay as a city, as an individual, somebody who becomes a portrait, somebody who becomes an actor, somebody who becomes an activist, a respondent. So I got a great opportunity in 2008 to work with uh, the famous, Indian actor Nasruddin Shah to make a short film. Like, it was a project that where an artist collaborating with anybody in the mainstream. So luckily, like, I got a chance to kind of work with Nasir, and so I presented him a script which speaks of the time, because the kind of work which I was doing around that time, which carried a certain kind of a social trauma. And I've been trying to reflect through my portraits, because I was known as a kind of large scale portrait painter. I studied, in JJ School of Art, mainly painting, BFA and MFA. So I gave him a script which was very simple, one page, which spoke of, maybe the last day of his life. He's dejected. He's, frustrated with the time. He wants to kind of, express his concerns, fear, and also manifest in a many levels. Like, my understanding about even art. I'm not saying cinema. I mean art and the history of portrait making. And I thought, I'll be able to bring everything through a man like Nasir, who also represents a certain era of Indian art. Uh, so it's a 13 minutes work first, and then I will, walk you through uh, the period which we are also, like, going to kind of discuss through the presentation. That is the last 32 years, because I reached Bombay in 1992, the year the Babri Masjid demolition happened, the riots happened, then post that the bomb blast happens. Like, I was actually juxtaposed into a social space which was completely opposite to what I grew up as a youngster in Kerala. Lived in a very diverse, multicultural, argumentative, in another way, like, I always said that Kerala is a place that where religion is like, you know, so very much, organically functions with all its, possible attributes, whether it is economic, whether it is spiritual, whether it is cultural, whether it is, socio-political, many aspects. So, but I saw a completely different India, like you also post 92. So the works carry that, the period of trauma where a creative individual, who went to do something, she shifted his entire focus and, decided to become something else, and continued that discourse. And also later, at one point of time, I come back to a site that where I left with a similar argument to kind of further heal the traumas that which we also suffer. So there's a kind of a narrative placed in this whole presentation. And I, as an artist, like to speak through the works which I'm doing at any point of time, whether at any conflicting site. And I like to engage in conversations and discourses. So, which will also, you will see that reflects in the work. So, when Sanil said, this is completely a different project where most of the people are going to be doctors, and there'll be also patients, and also, the enthusiasts of the subject. I was very much interested because for an artist, it becomes a site of learning, because nowadays, the art has changed its, you know, the expressive nature. I mean, there's a lot of important tools coming in, but at the same time, me as an artist has tried to stay with a certain kind of an idea of making, which you will also see. I mean, and as we move forward, I will try to explain it. So, so this is a 13-minute film. Like, I mean, if you think that, I mean, you got the pulse of it, we can maybe fast forward, and maybe, I can do that. So I'm starting with this, then we will do a walkthrough. In at any point, like, I mean, while I'm doing the slideshow, you can, intervene and ask me questions if you have not understood. See, the thing is that that's one reason I was a little bit concerned about the light, the quality of the image, because uh, visual art actually suffers that. I mean, in every point, because we also live in a place that where there is very basic infrastructure to kind of express the kind of art which we produce. So I'm okay. I mean, because this is a very little bit more of an intimate learning site, so we can have little dull, faded images. So I'm just starting this. I'll intervene at one point, maybe only because of the time, or otherwise, if you don't mind, we see it 13 minutes, just decide. So then I won't intervene because it's a work like that. So I just start, working with an act. I also have another edit with it, edit where I have worked with poems of Tukaram, where Tukaram argues with God. So that's a completely different kind of an edit where the poem actually strolls behind Nasir's head, and in fact, in another way, like, I mean, the film takes us back to uh, a time of that bhakti, poetic, especially in the Maharashtrian context. I mean, when I in conversation at that time as a site of solace, so just thought, I mean, I should add and say that. So 92 is the year I went to study art in Bombay. And I was born in a family, very multi, people are very differently engaged. My father had a matchbox factory, in Chur, uh, I know it's in Thrissur district, and he had 3, 4 different branches, and he was heavily connected with Tamil Nadu, Shiver, and so I grew up in an atmosphere where wood was a great present, a presence in our day to day, because everything was made out of wood. So wood comes back to my practice from that side. So I thought I should say that. I was born as the ninth son. I have a younger sister. We are 10 children. Uh, so my one of my brother, who was very much interested in textile design, he found my interest towards the same subject, and he asked me to kind of pursue textile design. That's how I left Kerala in 91. I went to NIT, but I didn't get through because that was the first time, like, the early, traumas of individuals addressing language as a biggest crisis the moment you leave Kerala. So I didn't get through, but I learned in that 5-day entrance exam in NIT many things. Then next day I tried JJ School of Art. That's the year 1992, and I got through, and I started my education as a textile design student. But that's the year towards the end of that year in December. One of the biggest tragedies of Indian history happens, and things started looking very different, because I went to a city which is very multicultural, diverse, a cosmopolis which has got a completely different identity, a city of dream, where everybody comes to kind of make their future. So things start like, I mean, you see that there's a certain falling apart happening in front of you. I was the only student in JJ School of Art who had joined after maybe, when I can see, like, I joined 1992 till nine till 2006. There was no other Malayali actually joined JJ School of Art, because it was also considered as a site that where commerce is entertained. The people who are interested in doing art with a very intellectual rigor, they'll go to Shantiniketan, Baroda. So there was a kind of a, different kind of a categorization. So I generally I enjoyed because my interest was textile design. But after these incidents, my interest started changing because I started, I was the only student, again a Malayali student, and also from a certain community in the hostel. So all these things started seeping in. That you are not that same individual who came from Kerala now living in Bombay in a very different social atmosphere. And I developed a certain kind of juxtaposition in my work in multiple levels. I mean, whenever I try to do things that, it came in as an idea into my work because India is a very multi-diverse, plural, you know, very different kind of possibilities which are available here. So I started developing that as, you know, as maybe an inherent quality this nation provides you to kind of survive, which generally continued. In fact, physically speaking, that our hostel in Bandra, Kalanagar, was sandwiched between two aspirations. One is a very fundamental aspiration, and another is that an aspiration of a youth that Sachin Tendulkar used to live the right hand side. I mean, the building, which was a colony called Sahitya Sabha. His father was, being a theatre involver. And left hand side, there was a colony called Kalanaga. So that's where Baltakara used to be an artist, so a cartoonist. So there was a colony. So in between that we had, and that Kalanaga colony was a settlement which was available in Bombay, where artists, writers, architects, theater personalities all lived together. So I was, as a student, that our hostel was inside, and you were sandwiched between those two aspirations, which is traveled along, fundamentalism traveled along with liberalization. And also cricket became a kind of a new, language of India through, a certain kind of an urban, phenomenon where Sachin represented it later. I mean, that I'm not going into that subject, but it was interesting to kind of see that we are, and I was placed in that kind of, and I was trying to observe that. I mean, what is these, shifts and changes that, how do you work on it? So my initial work reflects that. I mean, so I just added, wanted to start with this portrait because I had a studio inside an automobile garage for, even now I have. It started in 2001 when I shifted to a place called Borivali in Bombay. So I started painting the portraits of these ordinary boys who have also carried a certain kind of an aspiration, which you can see, in anywhere in India at that time, because Bombay was a city where, the heavy migration used to happen. And I was trying to identify that what is the cause of that migration. And it's multiple, and what they leave behind as an individual when they, take an identity in a city where they also try to forget their identity. So it's a very interesting sight. So I started painting them, so that's one reason. I mean, this is what I learned in JJ, that I did my master's and post graduation in, painting. But this was also the time, the politics, which was almost became a concern, traveling along with you because of the very strong juxtaposed life which you started in 92. This is exactly 10 years later. I'm not showing many of my work, which I produced around this time. There was an exhibition in Bangalore just before this exhibition called Ambulance, because ambulance I used as a metaphor of the time. Then this is uh, part of an exhibition where I responded to the Gujarat riot in 2002. These works were produced. These are produced in wood, the charred wood, and also using an automotive, because you see the influence of an automobile garage enters into the sculpture. So silencing that, the cry and the fear, and also the torture, that brutality which you suffer. And also it marks a certain kind of, you see that yellow mark. I mean, it also becomes a kind of a street event in an Indian context. You see certain kind of markers in the work which shows that. So in 2004, I mean, immediately after this project, I became a coordinator for one of the very interesting residency project in Bombay, which was part of a triangle residency, Vassal from Pakistan and Khoj from India, and also Tirtha from Sri Lanka. So I was one of the main coordinators. So after that residency for a month, which was an international residency, I was selected to go on a residency program to Pakistan. So I was in Karachi for a month, but my involvement, it was interesting. Like I'm in a post, Babri Masjid, post, kind of all kinds of, polarization, uh, certain kind of a surveillance. So this was some hopes that some kind of a cultural discourse were possible through these kind of triangle institutions. Luckily, I had this opportunity. I mean, you won't believe that. I mean, the time I had, it was, one of the best institutional memories I have engaging with youngsters there, people who have gone through, post, partition traumas, the artists who are working with the theater personalities, and completely different kind of a lifestyle, you know, which I could experience for almost a month. So I traveled to places like Tata, which is the Matli necropolis area that where the Indus, Valley civilization extension is there. So there's a place called this McLean Acropolis, which is almost like I think the second biggest burial sites in the world. So I'm not showing those images, but I'll show the reflections from that. I mean, what I wanted to depict. And I thought, this is the site was like a 13th, 14th century Sufi, settlement. And after I came back, I mean, I got a lot of inspiration to kind of address religion as a site of conflict in a emerging India. I'm talking about this exhibition, which I did in the Delhi Lalitakala Academy, a larger gallery space, the Mandi House, which is known 20 years ago. I mean, this is exactly 2004, where I addressed religion as a kind of site which is going to kind of conflict all our imagination. So, but I got that inspiration actually because I traveled, to go a little bit more closer and take that freedom, combine the freedom with what I also learned or grew up in Kerala. I mean, so there's a kind of a all these things, the resorts you started finding in your own language. So I used this calligraphic work. There's no text in it. It's just the calligraphy font. But I remember the inspiration because the entire Sufi, this burial settlement, all had ornations uh, in the what do you say the tombstones. It was decored, which was scripted, and which was in different way, like multiple kind of prayers were scripted in. So that became like a kind of a reference that I started celebrating that. This is another image. It's a work called Blood Red series, like keep cooking Blood Red series. So this is again a reference which I took from my travel because I saw I produced few works in Karachi where I took the reference of the Chindur, matlab that Chindur തള്ളുന്ന മറ്റേ റന്തായി മറ്റേ what do you call the leveler. So that I found in one of the markets, and I developed connecting it with Joseph. So I made it like into a large scale, brought that red into it, and brought that sign of violence into this work. And this is an extension from that work itself. It's called The Tragedy of Carpenter's Son. So you see that using a certain kind of a cultural or religious freedom, which I maybe imbibed, maybe living in Kerala, because Kerala promises you to very easily engage with like whatever the resources and knowledge is which is shared with you in multiple forms, whether it is philosophical or religious or cultural or political. So it's it's a very vibrant. That's why we are also like very argumentative in that sense. So I mixed it up. I mean, so gave a completely different expression to people, that there are different symbolisms used. This use of carpentry started engaging in my work. And there is also a big reason where I actually, almost adopted one of my, family carpenter's son, who left Kerala and he started living with me. It is almost like now the 24th year. Dhananjayan is with me, and he's from a very traditional craft, carpenter's family. He left, she divorced his wife, and he had a lot of problems. I mean, divorce went for almost 20 years. So this was a very interesting, period that where, as an individual, that he was also as yes, leaving Kerala, and we almost 20 years that we kept engaging in this his trauma, which we are also that I'm also trying to make work, and he's also like kind of engaging with work in a very different spirit. So I used to feel that. I mean, and he keeps going every 2 months to. So I'm bringing these. I mean, I never speak about these things like, I mean, while I do a presentation, but maybe because of this particular project, I thought sometimes there's certain kind of collaboration also, because the carpentry became very strong component because he actually left Kerala, and he started. Otherwise, I was making everything in Kerala. So I had a place in Jovur, and like where you must have seen like the very strong furniture tradition is there. I live around that place. So the wood became a strong metaphor. So you see these images. I'll just go a little faster, at the time. So this is again, one of our most celebrated image set, the lamb. But it was placed, and it was made in wood and charred, and placed like almost like a lost object which is archived. So these kind of symbolisms I could very easily play with and bring that narrative into place. So this is a work called The Third Day, where it's a large work where the memory was articulated through this. And this was one work which traveled quite a lot. When I did the show in Bombay, I added this work called My Father's Balcony. So where again, how do you resort back, to, I mean, my father had been already gone in 1996 when I was in fourth year. But this work I produced after almost like 9 years of his passing. So this is a work called My Father's Balcony, and what he taught me as a socialist and as somebody who was very much engaged with the political movements in Kerala. So this became a kind of a larger project where it puts together all these kind of religious symbolisms, and it becomes a site where which denotes that what kind of cultural background you come from, what kind of learnings you have, what is the balcony which from where you saw the world. So, and this work actually, I mean, I was lucky that it also went into Art Zoo, one of the most important public art project which happens in Netherlands, and where many masters have shown in the similar sites. So then, so this is the same thing. Like, I mean, as you are in Bombay, but you keep oscillating between like what is happening in Kerala. So, this is one work which I produced in 2006, around the same time, where I wanted to kind of bring in the argument around Sri Narayana Guru and what's happening to him in an Indian context. What is the kind of philosophic discourse? And this is 2006, almost 18 years ago. But in recent times, I started engaging with Guru in a very different way through the Backwaters Collective and also the TM Krishna concerts, which we developed. So the conversation could, go a little bit further. But here, and that project traveled abroad. And here, this was shown first in Kochi, where it actually brought in like multiple symbolisms together. And there is, I mean, you can see those. Uh, yeah, I think, yeah, there's a massage table, there is the memories of communism, there is a certain kind of civilizational memories brought in. So you see those, multiple layers, and bringing Guru as somebody who is like, I mean, a constant engager in a society like ours. I mean, today I think he's becoming more and more as part of our discourses. So You okay with time? Yeah. So this is another work. I put it into the context of this presentation. This is a work which got selected for the Venice Biennial in 2007, and the curator was Robert Storr, who's an American. So he was actually doing a survey project in a post 9/11 scenario, how the world is responding to the kind of impressions which you see around after this major event, I mean, which occurred, that 9/11 attack. So he was traveling. So, but this work has got a completely different story. Where I was talking about 2004, the coach, the workshop in Bombay. I was painting as part of the project in Bombay, and one Korean curator. So I'm just giving you an example, like I mean, how certain kind of an art project tries to engage in reconciliation, engages in like I mean, making new discourses. This work is one interesting example because I never thought that it'll go to I mean, it'll get selected into Venice Biennial. So the interesting context is sometimes you don't realize that a certain images has got a cosmopolitan possibility to kind of to converge and converse. So this work, a Korean curator, she was also an artist who was in Bombay, saw my work. Then she asked me like, I mean, can you participate in a project which we are doing in Germany, in Stuttgart, in a museum where the two Koreas, they are trying to kind of create a negotiated space, a reconciliated space called Middle Korea. And the exhibition was called On Difference. So you have to bring a project that which speaks about a possible discourse from extremity. So I decided to uh, paint the Jafar Panahi circle, which was considered like, I mean, which had one golden lion in Venice in 2010. And the film actually discloses the atrocities against women in Iranian society, the fundamental, the kind of, the brutalities which also goes into the society. So the film is like a very interesting side. But there is one moment in this particular film where this particular character, where she was waiting for a friend. I'm sure, I mean, you must have seen this film. Waiting for a friend, where she sees a framer's shop in a street in Iran, and she sees a Van Gogh's painting. So she actually casually sees it, and then when her friend comes back, she takes a friend. ഫ്രണ്ടിനെ കൊണ്ടുപോയിട്ട് പറയുന്നത് ഞാനൊരു ഒരു ഒരു സൈറ്റ് കാണിച്ചു തരാം ഇവിടേക്കാണ് നമ്മൾ രക്ഷപ്പെടാൻ പോകുന്നത് ഇതാണ് this is where all I mean I'm sure you remember that scene. But for me, that's a very interesting sight in that cinema where Jafar Panahi shows in 2000 maybe 9 when he produced that film, shows a European possibility to also escape from a very Iranian conflict site. Whereas an artist like I mean imagines a site and shows that I mean this is a place where it was a Van Gogh's painting, but she shows it as like I mean her village, where she's going to escape. But everything changes in a post 9/11 scenario. There's a woman, this same character who was in the film falls into a double jeopardy. I mean it's a post 9/11 Islamophobic world. So that was the idea, like I mean where you know this work was shown in Germany, and it came back. Then at a later period, like I mean, almost 4 5 months later, Robert Storr comes to Bombay and sees his work, and he also visits my studio, and then it goes back again to Venice in a form which is the painting. Earlier in 2010, it had one golden lion. After 7 years, this goes in the form of a painting to Venice Biennial, and that is the time where Jafar Panahi was also under house arrest. I mean, he was going through a kind of, So this work became a kind of constant reminder of, what Panahi was also trying to do. There are many other films like, to refer to come back to Panahi as a maker, and also addressing the same topic. So what I mean to say is that, how do you locate a certain site of trauma, but it gets placed into different contexts, but you don't lose the meaning. So the image becomes a very cosmopolitan representation of a certain subject which we are talking about. So I'm feeling sad that because I'm seeing it very clear here at the moment, you know. So sorry about that. So this is another site where I'm actually taking you a little, closer to the period I was much more interested in. Like I said, that the site of Islamophobia, larger global, conflicts which are emerging. You see civilization and cleansing happening in front of you. You see Iran happening, you see Iraq happening, you see Afghanistan happening. So I decided to do a project on that, and I did a show in 2008 in Berlin, which was a very large sculptural exhibition, which also includes paintings, but it addresses certain kind of a symbolism. And this is a 100 feet long work. The backside is like this, and this is again, I mean, deals with a lot of traditional carving, a lot of symbolisms, a lot of meaningful references into it. What you see behind, there are prints behind. I mean, I'll show you another image which brings this memory. So this is a work called Undertakers. This is again kind of what we go through in a day-to-day site, where death becomes part of your landscape or daily living. So the undertaking becomes like, I mean, a day-to-day act rather than the site of living. So you see this kind of conflicts is brought in and mapping a certain site. So I always felt that you know the war which is happening, it is not just for the resources. Sometimes, I mean, it is, we always articulate it as resources. So this is one work, also a continuation of the same conversation, but the title refers to what I said earlier, that it is titled Watching the Otherworld Spirits from the Gardens of Babylon. So that actually creates a kind of a larger landscape. It's a 6 feet tall work, 13 feet long, but when you keep all these five pieces together, it also reminds you of a primitive sculpting. So I wanted to play around that kind of an aesthetic, responding to a most contemporary issue like war and like occupation and displacement. So that's and you use a very traditional handmade technique to it. This is in Berlin, the gallery I exhibited. And I'm sorry that I'm not able to kind of go into the detail of this work. This is part of a project which I did with Iraq national football team in 2007. And I'll just give you a gist of it. When Iraq became the Asian champions in 2007, Yunus Mahmoud, the captain, he made a very interesting remark. He said America should leave the country, because we have defeated them in the football field by defeating actually Saudi Arabia, who was an ally with. So it's very interesting that, I mean, so I actually started following him. I traveled, and so they were playing in exile for almost 7 years. They didn't even have a coach, because they always went through brutalities, so violence. So I brought in that memory of the feet, which also gone through, has been a site of abuse. So and this is almost like a 7 feet tall wooden feet. Also reminds you of the fall, the war. It connects with architecture and human, the violent landscapes which you see around. So there's a certain kind of an aesthetic which is a post-war, you know, post destructive sites, which brings in represented through the material itself in the work, like concrete. So this is one other view of the work. Uh, it's another work called Middle Mindset, which is also critiquing a certain kind of neutrality which you've seen, which you see today a lot. I mean, because this was a statement made in 2008, but I have done another project in Dubai once with the same title, The Middle Mindset, because whenever you engage with that site, I mean, there's a kind of cultural numbness where politically you don't, side anybody, but to kind of accommodate a kind of economic flourish. So that's also another conflict that, I mean, as I think as we Malayalis have also very intimately have seen. That's one reason we couldn't develop cultural projects with a site like Middle East. I mean, I don't need to go into the detail of it. So, so this is another work. This is the മയ്യത്ത് കൊണ്ടുപോകുന്ന മയ്യത്തും കട്ടിലാണ് ശരിക്കും. പക്ഷേ the work is titled Last Pass. So I'll just tell you the symbolism in it for you to understand. In football, you know, maybe the extra time you get a last pass to kind of, to maybe make it even or, win. So it's a kind of a crisis site because I used football. I worked, with the Indian national football team from 2007. I also did a major project with the women's football team. I did a project with the French national football team celebrating the multiculturalism. I'm not showing all those references or images in it, but here, this is something which we all grew up with. I mean, we see like, something happening in Palestine, the body is carried as a procession, and that man who was a victim or, somebody who's like, in their terms as a shaheed, he gets a last chance to partake in a procession that he is resisting or what he resisted, throughout his life. So that is the last pass which is depicted in this. So it's, I'm not going into the detail more. So these are some other images, connecting to the notions of war. This is again large lives. Almost the figures are like, slightly larger than life. So this is Ahmad Shah Massoud. I mean, like I said, that the exhibition responded to three major sites: Afghanistan, Iran, and Iraq. So, and this is a very large painting, 10 feet by 6 feet. And is somebody whom I used to follow a lot. And in fact, I made a trip in 2018, went to Kabul and, went to Panjshir and visited his Qabristan and mausoleum. So it's somebody like, it was a very different kind of a moment after doing this project, visiting somebody like him, showing our own, camaraderie, like what he did. And it's fantastic to feel that where he lived, in the Panjshir, where his house was, the vantage point that where he kept a good use of, as a geographical site to resist certain kind of invasions which happened. And the reason I painted this work was something that which we have not, maybe marked much or discussed. He was killed 2 days before the World Trade Center attack. As most of you might be knowing. So I was also trying to kind of bring that. It is a work called, 9 by 9. So it's also titled politically or symbolically like that. This is an image from a documentary on Ahmad Shah Massoud, and this one also. These are all very large scale paintings. And this is Yunus Mahmood. So I had produced many works, which was also part of, it's a large scale print, 4 feet by 4 feet, which also carries a certain, the burns of, occupation. So you see a American map like a skin disease on his body. So it's all brought in. This is another image that where the Iraqi, the fans come to see the match. They come with, a certain agenda to protest against occupation and war. So they tie the Iraqi flag on crutches and, keep weaving and shout Yunus Mahmoud, the Yunu, the savior. It's a very interesting sight. When you go to see, I saw many football matches like where they were playing against, friendlies, also World Cup qualifiers against Australia, China. So it was because they accommodated me very easily. And maybe another reason they love Indians. So the entire team used to kind of have a very, intimate approach towards the project which I was doing. So the team singing national anthem. So am I good on time? Son? So this is another project. Again, I did a solo show in Iran in 2009, a project called Safe to Light. But I was trying to address the internal conflicts which Iran was going through. So it's also kind of there's a reason. I'll tell you why this exhibition happened. I'm not going to the details of the work, there was this head of House of Cultures, Shaheen Mirali, who became the director of, Bodhi Art Gallery. So he was like consistently in conversation with me about my work, and he has a very strong Iranian connection and also a very strong Gujarati connection. So he asked me once, like, I mean, which is the place that you like to exhibit your work? So I said one site. I said maybe New York. Then he asked, I mean, which is the other side? Then I said, Kerala. So that time, like, I mean, we had not thought of biennial or anything because I always wanted to do a solo project in Kerala. So then he said, okay, wait, but, let's do a project in Iran. That's how this, because he saw a certain language which need to be shown as a respondent, not like, I mean, the Iranian artists are like, I mean, in Berlin, they are in different sites of engagement, they are in London, they are a notice, but not an Indian artist like, I mean, who is also responding to this global, site of violence and war. Maybe Iran is a place that you should go and show. So I showed in an underground gallery called the Azad Art Gallery, and I showed the works. This is a work called Royal Screw. It's a these are all very sarcastic works also. Then the works which using an Indian reference but speaking about the conflict internal. Then this was a work which was later in 2014 shown in the Iranian pavilion in Venice Biennial. This is a work called Fragrance of Funeral. So there's a very different kind of detail to this work. So again, using a lot of, it also reminds you of the early work which I did with Guru, using the massage table. But I was also trying to kind of bring in the tragic mark as an embodiment of, like, I mean, almost like a fossil mark of our time. So it is Saab, where the body is normally kept, while you do a detox or treatment for the heal. So these are two juxtapositions of, again, you saw. So I had used this one image from which is an adopted image where the the public hangings which happened. So this work was slightly critiqued by some of the youngsters, that why do you want to speak negative things in, like, I mean, in a different site. So I had to kind of to counter argue, uh, and I had also given the citation in the image itself. Just so this was again another work called Halima. And this is actually a photograph of one of the protesters at the time of the Green Movement in London. She actually became very popular. But when I showed this, it was a large painting, but I censored her image and exhibited her portrait. So this is another walkthrough I just want to kind of quickly do to give you another historic site in an Indian art history. So there was this Rupika Chawla, one of the curators, one of the major historians, we have, and she was doing a project on Raja Ravi Varma's lithostones and oleographs. So, and she knew that, I have done few projects with Raja Ravi Varma's Malavali printing press, which is in near Lonavala and that region. So she asked me to kind of respond to Ravi Varma's oleographs and use the lithostones as a site to produce imageries. So I engaged with a kind of a longer conversation with her, and I told her I will use the lithostones, but I will tell the lithostones to tell a conflicting story, that where because Ravi Verma's popularity is like of using for using religious iconographies. So this, but I wanted to erase that, and I used the same lithostones, and I said a story of violence which India has also gone through. And this work was also shown in the 25th year of Sahamat in Delhi as a as a major work. And you see those readings on that, the partition riots, Rath Yatra, Babri Masjid demolition, the emergency, the anti-Sikh riots, 1969, the Ahmedabad riot, which changed the landscape, poverty Pokhran, Bombay blast, Gandhi Godse, Godra Modi. And it was almost presented like the way you saw the first box in an archive. So it was almost a kind of a, it was an opportunity to respond to an artist whose iconographies are mainly around, religion, and you kind of respond to that. I mean, that this project is about that. And this, I think, I mean, maybe you also must have seen it. I mean, this was also published quite a lot. In fact, I've got notebooks of this to kind of give it to you. So this is, one project which I keep doing, like I mean, politics of appropriation, which you see in front of us. So I did the series with five ideals, the large, scale works, which was shown in JNU first, and then it was shown in Delhi in another event, and then Cochin. So now, uh, yeah. So very direct, conversations that which I thought, and this was done in 2014. That was the first response to this after this regime also came into power. So this is also the time, like I mean, I was also very heavily busy, with what I was doing in Cochin. So I'm just walking you through these images now. How I was also like I mean, continuously engaging with the notion of nationalism, which was walking along with us. That's one reason I said post 92, the 32 years that which me also has lived as an artist, consistently like I mean was forced to engage with maybe the same subject, you know you'll see a kind of recurring of even when I started discussing about the biennial, I felt that it is the same subject. You're talking about diversity, multiculturalism. You're talking about bringing art as as a tool to resist. So we are in one way, uh, the when I mean, I'm also interested in actually studying the cross section of what happened in India, the kind of work which even Vivan Sundaram did in 1993 after the the Bombay riots. I mean, he came in with large scale installation projects to Bombay, and so all those memories also like I mean comes back. I mean, when we discuss. So this is a kinetic, it's a sculpture, but it's kinetic. There's a jugaad machine which keeps rotating the line capital. But when you see in front of these three line capitals, you only see three. I mean, that's also the visual play in this work. When it moves, you experience only three. The fourth one is kind of, visually missing. So, which generally, if you ask, I mean, I've asked many people, like, I mean, how many lines are there in line capital? They'll all say three. So it's also kind of a, the way the design is also played. Now there is only one. So I'll tell you, I'll come back to that. So this is uh, another work again, but this is rubber, and the Ashoka pillar is split into four, along with the line capital. It's a large work. It's a 9 feet tall, rubber hanging, the line capital, and these were all shown in Bombay, and I also showed this work in Trivandrum once in a public space at a very different at part of the one of the design festivals, and it was also shown in Delhi. Again, this, I mean, these are all response to what, hello, yeah, what is going through. So, and also, like, I mean, bringing symbolisms and, uh, how much time I have? Salil, I should, so it's 12:45. Yeah, so should I just fast forward a bit? Ah, okay. I can go till then there's a film, the last one, another 10 minutes. It's okay. This, I think the presentation, I can just go a little faster because maybe the context is set. This is actually a work responding to, a history, also art history. Uh, it responds to Marshall Duchamp's urinal. So this is actually a portrait where it was part of my one of my solo show, where the portrait is deaf, dumb, and blind, but it is made in the same material the urinal is made. So there's a kind of a you know play in this particular work. I mean, the same glossy white ceramic material. And these are few paintings that there are references to it, but maybe because of time, I'm not going into it. These works were based around like my two trips to Robben Island, mainly Mandela's prison, that where I also took it as a kind of site of experience. I produced four works. These are painted with a contemporary reference from India, that isolation cells. These are woodcut prints, but it is titled woodcuts, and but it also reminds you of from the certain moments in recent times, the farmer's suicide. But at the same time, the hanging all figures, they are all in yogic postures. So it's just a kind of play with figurations. And so work called Get a Dark Cloud Free. So it's a large triptych work. So this is what I was saying, that I mean, always when I'm trying to play with a language, this use of multiplying and also juxtaposition, it just comes because I always feel that I mean, you learned art, or you started your career by juxtaposing with the sites of violence. So it's a and it doesn't go away, so it just keeps coming back in your work. So this is a large painting. It's an 18 feet long painting. It's called Dandi Bridge. There's a story that why I wanted you know the bridge is falling into a kind of an endless ocean. Uh, I developed it because of not just because what is going on today and what kind of landscape. The color, actually, it's a very saffronized, sunset which you see, and the cloudy, and it is the original uh, Gandhi Bridge, which is still there next to the Gandhi Ashram in Ahmedabad. But while I was documenting this, one watchman came and stopped me, and he said, "नहीं नहीं photo नहीं खींच सकता है." So I said, "नहीं क्यों नहीं नहीं ये यहाँ नहीं." Then I kind of tricked him, and I took my documentation. Then I start having a conversation with him. So I asked him like, "वहाँ क्या है?" like वो side पे क्या है? Because he was not allowing me to walk that side. So Dandi Bridge, then there should be some extension to the place. I said, क्या है वहाँ पे? Like so, तो आप मुझे जाने नहीं दे रहे. So he said, वहाँ पे तो कब्रिस्तान है. So just a code. I mean, like you're standing on a Dandi Bridge, and the other side of the Dandi Bridge is saying, like, वहाँ पे तो कब्रिस्तान है. So it's just, somehow it had a completely different kind of an echo in my head, and I wanted to depict that, so the site of burial in a modern world. I mean, because now you see that the ocean has become like a kind of a site of disposing, so certain kind of histories and violence. So I just wanted to kind of bring that, and also certain another narratives which I'm engaged in since last 2018, working on this sea a boiling vessel, and multiple knowledge streams all started flowing into it. So just going faster, this is a project which I did in 2018, responding to Indian Constitution lynching, and also responding to certain notions which has been like scientifically explained and proved. So the Holy Shiver is a term which I used as a title of my solo exhibition, where I was responding to what's going on. This is, I'm talking about 2018, almost, yeah, 6 years ago. This is preamble diminishing into, to dark. This was a show which I did in Vadera Gallery in Delhi, and this was also shown in the art fair. So these are some parallel discourses in the work, the true twins. And this was again another conversation which was brought into the exhibition called Dhamma Swaraj, where later, it also, extended into a few other projects. So this is Ambedkar, in conversation, maybe with his self, maybe with his time, maybe with his, different sides of imaginations and interests. So, but this work goes into another site. I'll show you that. And this is another work called I Think, Therefore I Am. So this is where though the Constitution's illustration starts from the Indus civilizational side, I was always interested in, bringing this image after I saw one interesting project, which was done by Naman Ahuja, where how he was also trying to kind of respond to Indian history and civilizational memories. He did a project called India and the World, which was very inspiring. In fact, this was the same time, I did this show, and he wanted to include few works from this into the project. So this is again a work which was juxtaposed with the same title, I Think, Therefore I Am. This is the display of the Constitution with a distorted image, which you see on the right hand side. I'll just go a little faster. This is the line capital image, the preamble, the content list, the first image in the Constitution, which represents the union and the territory. I don't know whether you have seen. If you have not seen this, I'll just make some pointers and go. And the union and the territory is represented by, the Harappa seal in the Constitution. Then citizenship. It is represented by an image of a Vedic, site where, it's almost like a Vedic ashram, where in its articulation, when you read further, you realize that citizenship is attributed to the site of knowledge and discourse, learning, so that's how it works. Then fundamental rights, one of the popular images from myth. It's from, epic, from myth, it immediately goes into, from epic, it goes in, no, from myth, it goes into epic. Again, another one, an image from the epic. It's titled, it's represented for the directive principles. Gandhi's Dandi March is brought back. So you see this, a certain memories of, larger contributions brought in. And this is one of my favorite image in the Constitution, where I don't know, you can see it clearly, but if anybody is interested in, I can share it. This is Gandhi in Naukali, and the image represents a title, Emergency Provisions. So it's fascinating that our artists, thought, because after the Constitution was drafted by the drafting committee, Nehru invites Nandalal Bose and his colleagues, and also the famous calligrapher Prem Bihari Narayan Raizada to decor. And both our copies, English and Hindi, it's a handmade Constitution that which we have, which is kept in the helium box. But you see this, a very interesting message they draws in. It's the emergency provision of our leadership should be, be at the site of conflicts, violence, come talk, come up with resolutions. So it's very fascinating to kind of see these kind of metaphors in the Constitution. And this is a violent ship, which represents, the idea of repeal, which have also gone through or seen in history. So this is another site of image which carried the title of the exhibition, where again it carries some of the dark histories of India, partition, Sikh riots, the Bombay riots, Bombay Blast, the Gujarat riots, the Dadri, Then the Una killings, the village. So this is Junaid who was killed in the Delhi railway station. So these were all parallelly, juxtaposed with the other works which was exhibited. So I'm just going through three images quickly. I'm sure visually you can connect these three. So this is a statement of, by juxtaposing, bringing Vemula into a memory into the show. So there's a fan which is made by wood, but exhibited like a work of art as a site of, maybe like, it's like a weapon, which you use to kind of kill yourself. And a portrait of an ordinary, Indian, who looks like, represents a certain kind of a strata of community. Then a medieval torture, tool, which is also hanging next to. This is again another image, a rubber sculpture, which you can play with, so you can actually change the figuration. If you want to go, like, you can change the expression of the work, and, so this is kind of an ongoing, site of violence was created in the gallery. Again, another memory into the exhibition from Banaras, not just from Banaras, from a particular period of Indian history. So, through an individual, through music, through a certain kind of a culture, civilization, one image has that power to kind of, bring in an immediate juxtaposition. This is again another work which was also placed next to the Constitution. This is what I said, that, going into that single line idea, where we saw that, from the line capital to a single, image, the lionization, which was also happening. So that was also brought into this particular exhibition. So this is another from the 2018 exhibition. 2019, I took Ambedkar statue and permanently installed it in South Africa in the Cradle of Humankind near Johannesburg. It is inside an institution right now as an argument. This is this was 2019. There was an exhibition I was invited into, and I took this Ambedkar work to present to like, as in responding to the concept note which was shared by a European curator. So the exhibition was titled The Power of Sight. So I'll just read, maybe you cannot read this because it's an interesting concept note where, in fact, the arrival of Ambedkar in Africa, or in placement of Ambedkar in the cradle of humankind, as a kind of almost like completing a certain kind of cycle of human, movement and evolutionary history. So the concept note said that the course of humanity periodically pivots due to a moment of insightful genius, a lightning strike, or perhaps the friction of two stones was once transformed into the first controlled fire, a critical evolutionary landmark in the development of society. The control over energy is and will always be defining the history of humans, providing at once the wonders and the controversies we face today. So the moment, he shared this concept note, I said, okay, wow, and great moment to kind of take Ambedkar to the power of sight, where humans learn to control fire. So it's like symbolically, it was working very well for me. So I took the same sculpture which you saw earlier in Delhi, and on a different pedestal, but I changed the pedestal styling of it. I made 4 different plinths, and on the smallest one and the tallest one, Ambedkar is placed. In one, you can actually speak to him at the same level. He's on your eye level. The bigger one is like you have to go up. But the other 2 planes are, left empty. So it's almost like a kind of site of, conversation. So the last segment I'm showing you. These are some of the recent works which I produced, where I'm also going back human body as a site, where I'm using human body in my work and coming back and using historical references, how artists have used human body as a site to, create discourses and also engage in telling stories of pain, so whether, I mean, even if it's like a painting of Van Gogh, Potato Eaters, it is that, the social site of tragedy which you see keep occurring all across the world was emblematized by, somebody like Van Gogh, so that human reality. So it's artists have continuously used it, I mean, and very successfully, with with a very immediate effect. So that's why I used a reference of Van Gogh's Potato Eaters, because it's also a very popular visual image. So this is a work I produced after the COVID, what you saw in the form of Exodus. So it also carries a certain kind of a, the notion of fear, like the kind of pain which people experience walking like thousands of kilometers. It's all carved into the work. And this is also a work titled Walking Towards the National Museum. So it had a concept note which explained that what should we be archiving in a post, COVID or post Exodus arena, from an Indian art, an Indian site of art expression, because we've not responded to, I mean, many of the artists have not responded actually to the site. So it was also an argument that, what should be, we archiving, in our own national museums, in response to that. So this is a continuation of that. You will see this is a work called Midnight in Calcutta. Again, you see a certain memory of, post-independent India, partition time, time of famine, sites like, and for example, it also reminds you of Now Kali again, where Gandhi was, what kind of engagement he was having in a social site. So, and this has a story. I can briefly go. There's a poem by, Kalpata Marsh. Uh, I mean, before writing the poem, he actually had sent me after seeing, I mean, we share our works. So he said that, I mean, why don't you make a work which represents the time where Kaligalathu, Dharmadevan, കുതിരയുടെ രൂപത്തിൽ ഒറ്റക്കാലിൽ നിൽക്കും. So why don't you make a work like that? So then later he wrote a poem. So I actually made this work, keeping uh, in that in mind. So this is again another work. I mean, I don't want to go to the detail of it. It is stepwell. India is a country like which has produced 98% of stepwells as part of human settlement struggles, finding resources. But this is a stepwell which goes towards up, which, kind of monopolizes or creates, the, what you say that, you see a single metaphor of land capital in this. The other lines are removed. So this is a response to Nandalal Bose's, again, the image which you saw, the Salt March, but a very different response, combining with Gandhian minimalism, that which sometimes I use in my art as a minimal approach, carrying a certain memory. There are carvings on that.
Of viewing a single frame, but on watching that, it's like maybe the most iconic Muslim, as we know, Nasruddin Shah, and with a pointing. It was a all the 13 minutes. It was very. It was a lot of drama, I should say. And personally, sitting here, I could see this person here with his cross, and on this side there was the clock, and definitely it made a huge sense. So I would actually, we have come to a medical humanities workshop. So, but I think all this is too much connected to our discipline as well, as people, as maybe as physicians or even patients. How, I don't know what to say. It's something like, it was a very, what we call, I think Kafka has told that all languages but poor translation. So this is something which is beyond language, as visuals, something which could represent that. So thank you so much for the
Yeah.
opportunity.
So this is a work called White. Uh, you see the details. So there's a very different way of addressing a certain kind of social issues. I think I spoke about this. I mean, how the human body. I mean, this is a mannequin which is like been in use since almost 500 years in art history. But what I tried to do is here, I my interest in how do you deal with it. As I said earlier, in 2001, this is very much emblematic, almost like a memorial to my own carpenter on the right hand side. What you see is like, I mean, which the മറ്റേ കട്ടയില്ലേ മറ്റേ ലെവല് പിടിക്കാൻ വേണ്ടിയിട്ട് ആശാരിമാർ ഉപയോഗിക്കുന്ന കട്ട ഉണ്ടല്ലോ. That is still very popular. I mean, because he started using it in Bombay galleries because he became very popular as, Riyas ka Anna ko bulao. That was the dialogue to display art because he was so precise. And he became very popular. When any exhibition comes, like, I mean, they'll call him to display. 2 3 days he goes off my studio, and he only uses this, to understand the level and all. So his right hand side is almost like a memorial to my association also with him. The left hand side is a pencil he's holding. The right hand side is the katta, that the level. And the right hand side is the image on the left hand side is again, what Brancusi did with the idea of sculpting, which kind of transformed the history of art making. So this I'm going faster. This is again another work called The Wall. This is again the same body carrying a wall in between. So for us Malayalis, like, I mean, wall is a very famous symbolism in multiple levels. But I'll just show you why this work becomes very important for me as a language. So what you see on the right hand side is the detail where 3 bullet marks on Gandhi's body. This work, the figure as an artist carries this, and he's standing, and it's a larger work. It's almost like 10 feet tall, and it's broader. But what he's carrying is also kind of one of the strongest tragic history which we have gone through and we still go through. So the bullet mark, which you see on the one side, it actually hits the memory of, I mean, the cradle of our own civilization, which represented in our constitution as the site. So the Harappa seal. So that's the kind of play which I have done to kind of make a very simple statement. When you shot Gandhi, like, I mean, you did this beyond what is the normal conversations. I mean, it has actually disturbed a certain kind of an equilibrium which we have built. So that message comes in, and these are again a further use of again playing with the same body. So what is on top is the parts of the body itself. Here, these are skulls. Here it becomes, it's almost like, you're carrying your own, uh, all kinds of notions and sufferings or whatever. This is actually a sketch which I had produced and which I made it into a woodcut later. This is a pillar which actually carries images of, like, I mean, skulls and violence and atrocities. So I'll just end with this particular note. If we have time, maybe we can see that film after. Just, can you read this, or you want me to read it out? This is actually the note which I produced for the previous work. In the neo-criminal world we live in, founded on ruthless power and omnipresent surveillance, we are worlded upside down, spiritually, economically, and emotionally rendered helpless. It is stripped of narratives of connections with life, world, and history, or of organic context, free spaces, pulsations of time. This world in limbo is that of frozen gestures, suppressed imaginations, and muted voices. The new agendas and future maps drawn by fundamentalists only seek to escalate the crisis, rendered life more and more vulnerable and fragile. So it's the site, I mean, why I showed you this text along with this work, because this is the site where I'm now working as an extension of this, if you stretch that 32 years of art making, this is the site where I'm in, and I'm producing a work which responds to the modernist era, the Indian modernist era, where you speak of our independent leaders, philosophers, our attributed voices, our artists, our musicians. So it's a very large project that I'm in, where I'm working around. And I thought maybe it's interesting to kind of say that in two reasons, because of two, I mean, one, I'm doing that work as a response to, a very conflicting notion of art, which is being celebrated today. The second is like, I mean, in how the market has a side, as a continuous power to kind of re-navigate art making towards the direction they want. I mean, so it's also, there are two reasons I'm responding to it. Why I'm saying is like, I mean, today, if you really look at Indian art as a site of making, uh, what is being celebrated or what is being like, I mean, monetized by agencies or auction houses or galleries is the Indian modernist art practices, which is actually in complete contrast with this regime, that what they are trying to speak. The best example was that which we saw as a statement was M.F. Hussein's work shown in Venice by an Indian institution as almost like a voice of resistance against, even, I mean, I'm fascinated with that kind of side, that how art in these situations, I mean, as an artist actually has the ability to outlive and go away from a site of denial as an individual, because Hussein was somebody like, I mean, who left the country, who kept his citizenship back here and moved into his artistic freedom in a very different way. That same artist represents India in a post you know in a site that where we are still struggling to kind of navigate and understand the conflict between Indian modernity and the current political debates and discourses. So I thought that's one reason I am interested in that site of modernity as as a site of energy and site of resistance. And we speak in a very simple term that we just say that I'm a Nehruvian, but it's, for me, it's not just a Nehruvian site, but it's also a site of a lot of liberal possibilities. Yeah, this near my studio, this man lived, and you saw that him doing the graffiti, and there are a lot of myths around him. People used to consider him as a Baba. Some people told that, I mean, he was a football coach and no claims. Somebody said he used to work in a bank. That's one reason. A lot of numerics and money related remarks comes on the walls. You must have noticed that $1 roti is something which kind of a recurring metaphor. But I also started noticing that if anything happens today, he might reflect next day. So he was not completely like, I mean, lost or lunatic, or he was somewhere, he was also very agile. And I used to just wander around. The same expressions I've got almost like, some 9 hours of footage. I made, 13 minutes film out of it. But it was it is, and he's no more. I mean, but, and his art is still around. That Borivali place, all walls still carries this, and it was a kind of, unnoticed, unmarked art project by somebody like him. But yeah, I think for me, I mean, I've also not been able to kind of decode what he keeps writing, but I've seen relationship with where he writes. If it's a bank, next to the bank wall, he will write something similar to, money, or something happened in recent times. Maybe some kind of an occurrences which he overheard, or, so it comes into the work. But for me, it was very fascinating as an artist to observe him. And he's also drawn outside my studio building consistently. The teapots, so the clay pots, it still carries his writings, and it is still there. And yeah, I think it, for me, I mean, it was also like, I mean, making an archive of what maybe at some point when I get time. And I did this in 2014, in between my other busy projects. But it's maybe fascinating to kind of, to get into what he's wrote, what he's actually written, and who he was. Uh, and nobody, I mean, I've spoken to few people, so they have no clue. I mean, some people said he's from Pune, he's a Maharashtrian. He ran away from Pune and he started, being around. Yeah. And yeah, I think, I mean, actually you miss, there's one sequence that where he's, at the evening, he just goes to, I mean, some kind of a creative urge, and he just goes with this. And the fascinating thing is the color. I mean, the white tube which he uses. I think maybe it's the first time an artist using in Indian, art history like that. This is the Tambaku Suna, the tube which you buy with Hathi Chap in Bombay. So you buy a packet of Hathi Chap, Tambaku is given as a compliment. And so that the entire work which is done all around, kilometers, like almost like 3.5 square kilometer area, everything is done with that tube. So it's an interesting, also site to study. And yeah, he doesn't respond. You speak to him, he moves away. So there are many instances when we were shooting, he just walks away. I mean, he will go and stand next to a tea shop, he gets tea. Some people consider him as a Baba, they give him food, and the moment he comes, they are very happy, So, and he never asks anybody anything. That is also another thing. Very random behaviors. You must have seen that he's picking, ചൂലൊക്കെ എടുക്കുന്ന കച്ചറ ആ ചൂല് and then he walks with a certain കുറേ ഇമേജുകളുണ്ട് ഭയങ്കര രസമുള്ള ഇത് പിന്നെ നമ്മളൊരു ചെറിയ കട്ടായ കാരണം കൊണ്ട് പലതും ഉപയോഗിച്ചിട്ടുള്ളത് പിന്നെ ശബ്ദം ഭയങ്കര ഇമ്പോർട്ടൻ്റ് because the sound is designed as per his eye movement and his behavior pattern. It is designed by this Gunjan Shah. I mean, he's from FTI. Because JJ School of Art was an abstract school, but I never came out as an abstract artist. So the impact was very high, and the time you went, and also where you lived, and the other, occurrences in socio-political side. I think everything, was very consistent, and I always used to feel that, I mean, if you have to keep, your art very alert and agile, and you have to take or engage topics like that, and you have to go choose very complex terrains which nobody has, you know, you know, kind of engaged with. I mean, so that's something which always fascinated me. So, and it continues. I think maybe even in 2010, and sharing the idea of even the biennial, it is also to kind of create a site to for a larger discourse where the country was going into completely a different direction. So Kochi becomes a site of, I mean, it becomes a metaphor, site of art making, and the kind of art which also produced. So I feel that maybe because of this experiences of Bombay allowed you to kind of take risk and challenge and like come and move around, navigate and organize, curate and fundraise. It's a kind of all multiple activities which was very alien to a place like Kerala, where you believed like artists like come in painting or a sculpture, but the first edition changes the perceptions, and so it just keeps on. And it's a site, so for first edition, like you have around 100 artists you're working with from all different parts of the world. So you're not just addressing your your site anymore. The next edition, again, another artist with like a completely different topic and ideas, cosmology, and so then third edition there's another artist. So maybe all those things impacts you to produce, because you're not just producing, you're facilitating, you're maneuvering through complexities, discourses, conflicts. So I think that becomes an asset as an artist, not just a painter who's sitting in your studio and making. And I keep doing that. I mean, 2015, I started Uru as an institution just because of that. To continue that, what seed you have put, to engage in a maybe in a maritime discourse or in a cultural discourse, Kerala's cultural history. So, so the violence is, I think it's not my interest. It is a social phenomenon, and it's a constant thing. And you respond to that. And it's a struggle also. It is very difficult to practice like that because it creates a lot of economic struggle. It creates limited possibilities, and it is not like an Indian art is in a very different tangent, especially today. If you really look at now, there is a lot of interest for which we've been discussing also. There's a lot of interest globally, nationally, towards Dalit art practices, which is emerging in India. A lot of academic interest, a lot of archiving tendencies among the Dalit art practitioners, which was never there. So this is changing. So earlier, the modernist thinkers and theoreticians, they denied that. So ഒരു പുതിയൊരു പോസിബിലിറ്റി ഉണ്ട്. You will see more about the violence against the Dalits and the atrocities which they suffer. There are very interesting artists doing, like there is Vikrant Besse, an artist who recently became very popular in India. He's archiving a certain kind of Dalit history, Ambedkarite thoughts, Dalit Panther movement histories, Mama Ambedkar, Dalit poets, so like Namdev Dasal and all those people. So artists have started using it also as a time to memorialize these things which are kept aside by Indian, maybe the modernist thinkers and art historians, and so it's in a churn also. Under participation എന്ന് പറയുന്നത്, it's I don't come from, or I never used an idiom that I represent ഒരു മാർജിനൽ ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റ്, അങ്ങനത്തെ ഒരു സൈറ്റിലല്ല. ഞാനെപ്പോഴും ഒരു ബോംബെ മെയിൻ സ്ട്രീമിൽ നിന്ന് ഡിസ്കോഴ്സ് ട്രിഗർ ചെയ്യാൻ ശ്രമിച്ചിട്ടുള്ള ഒരു ആർട്ടിസ്റ്റാണ്. സോ ഫോർ മീ ഇറ്റ് ഇസ് സംതിങ് വിച്ച് യു സോ ഇൻ ഫ്രണ്ട് കൈൻഡ് ഓഫ് എ തിങ്. സോ ഇറ്റ്സ് നോട്ട് ലൈക്ക് യുവർ, ആ ഒരു ഡിഫറൻസ് ഉണ്ട്. സോ ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് ഹാപ്പനിങ് ഇൻ കേരള. ഇഫ് യു സീ ദറ്റ് ഇറ്റ് ഈസ് നൗ വെൻ യു സീ ദറ്റ് ഈ കഴിഞ്ഞ പ്രാവശ്യത്തെ ചില വർക്ക് പ്രൊജക്റ്റുകളുമായിട്ടുള്ള ഡിസ്കോഴ്സിലൊക്കെ എന്തുകൊണ്ട് കണ്ടംപററി ഇഷ്യൂ അഡ്രസ്സ് ചെയ്യുന്നില്ല എന്നുള്ളൊരു ചോദ്യം വന്നിരുന്നു. കാരണം മോസ്റ്റ് ഓഫ് ദം ആർ മേക്കിംഗ് ട്രോപ്പിക്കൽ ലാൻഡ്സ്കേപ്സ് ആൻഡ് സോ ഇറ്റ്സ് യു ആർ എലിനേറ്റിംഗ് യുവർ സെൽഫ് ഫ്രം ദ റിയാലിറ്റി. അതുകൊണ്ട് ദറ്റ്സ് ഓൾസോ an interesting thing. So it helps you to engage.